Alright, Arizona Sunshine 2 just got its Quest 3 update that was just released to everyone who owns the game, and to my knowledge without any type of marketing or build up for this update coming to Quest apart from the initial announcement of this eventually releasing. And although the game is on the shorter side, as I completed the game in about 5 hours on the hardest difficulty in my first playthrough, on PCVR the game is impressive and looks really good. And if you purchase this game on Quest, you do also get the Rift S version as it's cross-buy, so that's a plus. So now let's get into the update and what it brings, my impressions, then a side-by-side visual comparison with Quest 3 gameplay before and after the patch. I booted this game up after the update. I'm not gonna lie, this update is kind of underwhelming if I were to compare it to another game like Saints and Sinners that just got a Quest 3 upgrade as well. In Arizona Sunshine 2, the massive upgrades are more subtle and not really noticeable right away. The Saints and Sinners patch wasn't amazing, but this update kind of left me thinking, is that really all? I booted up Arizona Sunshine 2 without metrics and played for about 2 to 3 hours, to the point I had to double check if the update was installed. The last time I booted up the game was about 2 weeks ago in order to get pre-patch footage. But before I get into my thoughts and review of this update, let's go over the patch notes. So Arizona Sunshine 2 finally got its long-awaited Quest 3 upgrade. I've gotten plenty of comments mentioning that they were either waiting for the patch to drop to get the game, or if they already purchased it, waiting for the patch. Patch 1.2 brings a quote-unquote massive graphics overhaul for Quest 3. This patch is 23 gigabytes, double what it was previously, with upgraded 4K textures, reworked and improved quality of prominent visual effects like blood and particle effects, and added better shading and fuzzy fur to Buddy. Whereas before Buddy was basically just a moving stretch texture, it also mentions allowing players to bring more than 2 grenades, which is a major improvement to the quality of life to actually allow players and incentivize us to take advantage of collecting and building with the materials in the world. They've also added the classic Arizona Sunshine 1 reload and improved poster calibration, and it also mentions a slight increase to the render scale on Quest 2, improving its visual clarity. I'll mostly be covering Quest 3 in this video. More in detail, the patch notes mention key features that made its way to the Quest 3 are improved zombie visuals, adding both higher quality models within the patch. More in detail, the patch notes also mention key features that made its way to Quest 3 with improved zombie visuals. Within the patch, it also mentions various other fixes and tweaks, improving the overall quality of the game. So now with my impressions, is the Meta Quest 3 graphics overhaul a massive improvement to the game's graphics? No, not really. I would call this more of a refinement to how the game is currently. And it's honestly kind of disappointing compared to recent Quest 3 upgraded games, as this initially was pushed back due to issues regarding V60's Quest OS update. That's not to say that this game graphically is horrible, as it's one of the better titles visually, with a half-length campaign that you can also play co-op. Arizona Sunshine tries to incorporate both beautiful scenery at a scale and tries to include dynamic combat with hordes of zombies approaching you. For a standalone headset, this game is impressive, but the problem is that it still very much looks like a Quest game, and a large part of why that I noticed with playing is the lack of shadows, as well as other things in my third playthrough of this game. So let's get into the comparison with a side-by-side to show you in better detail what the exact differences and improvements are, starting from the visuals to gameplay. First thing you will notice is that they tweaked and downgraded the in-game resolution scale. On the metrics, EBW and EBH, which are the eye buffer resolutions that are rendered for each eye, the higher the number, the sharper the visuals in trade-off with performance, headroom, and battery life. The visual clarity is slightly worse on the patched version, and with the game bringing 4K textures, they are noticeable to areas that reuse certain textures again and again. If you get close to textures, you will notice sharper visuals. But the catch is, since the game already uses a type of spatial resolution scaler, limits level of detail at around 10 feet, resulting in less quality textures as you move away from objects, plus the fixed foveated rendering around the edges of the lenses, the 4K textures upgrade sort of gets mitigated in this update, and unless you're really close to the textures and between gameplay, the upgrade is hardly noticeable. The larger upgrade on the patch is certainly focused on the visual effects, as blood and particle effects are much more enhanced. Guns and melee weapons have more of a visual punch than before. Or looking through windows inside of buildings have more particles and a glow, improving certain sceneries like tunnels so that they don't look so dull. Another thing I noticed between entering certain areas is that sometimes they'll have a lens flare effect, and with all of this you can tell saw that they sacrificed some of the resolution in part to get more visual effects. And that is a well-welcomed improvement to give the world much needed visual depth, as on launch it really lacked that. As for me, the greatest detriment on Quest are lack of visual effects and shadows. Lacking visual effects make environments feel flatter than they are, and many games on Quest start to feel very samey whether they are developed on Unity or Unreal. That brings up my next point on the update bringing much improved shaders to Buddy, which is your dog companion. Shaders on Buddy allow the game to alter the brightness, color, and saturation. In hand, it allows for a better visual representation of lighting to the dog if he enters inside a building or goes outside or is in the tunnels, as it's reflected off the texture of the dog to give the impression of real-time lighting and shadows. It certainly works better than before, but at times, like in the tunnels, it will look as Buddy has transcended into the next life as he glows in a dark area. By far and probably the biggest and noticeable difference with this update is that Buddy now has fur, whereas before he didn't on the Quest version of the game. Now he's actually your furry friend and kind of comes close to resembling that of the PCVR version, and it kind of has a moving animation if he moves away or jumps around. Next up, there is also an improvement on zombie visuals, adding higher quality models and shading, with hair on certain zombies now it amounts to actual hair instead of a blob or a single texture made out to resemble hair, and shaders that visually better represent whether zombies are indoors or outdoors or hit lit up areas. They also did slightly change the aesthetic of the zombies to look more dead by giving them a grayish skin tone rather than a pale one. It gives off a more realistic look to zombies in Arizona Sunshine. Though in this game, compared to Saints and Sinners, zombies run at a lower frame rate, which allows them to fill up the screen with 3 to 4 times as many zombies than other games synchronously. Lowering the frame rate isn't anything new, and in this game is used on the zombies, and usually it's used when they are either out of view, exiting your view, or far in the distance. This game sometimes, when in a sequence, will have issues loading up zombies. That specifically is a problem on the Quest version. Sometimes if you're shooting at zombies, they aren't actually rendered in, and until the 3rd or 4th bullet, it will actually register that I'm shooting a zombie, or it creates this odd feeling that the game is visually ran at 72 Hz, but every other thing, whether opening doors or ammo cases, along with zombies, run at a lower FPS. It doesn't make the game unplayable, but combat doesn't feel as good as Saints and Sinners. And yeah, that pretty much sums up the new changes that the update 1.12 brings to Arizona Sunshine 2. This update, in terms of actual improvements and being an overhaul, is very lackluster. Is it worth purchasing Arizona Sunshine 2? Yes, but until it's on sale for 30% or more, as I think it's slightly overpriced still for what the game offers, with its less than 5-hour campaign depending on your skill level. And devs who, after initial release of a game, just kind of let it be, not including any massive DLCs other from the first game. Seeing this update firsthand, it's kind of a letdown, as I kind of expected a whole lot more than just visual effects. You have to look really closely in order to see any of the visual improvements that this update brings forth, as when I booted up the game, I had to double check if the game was properly updated. Think of this update as more of a visual improvement to the existing version of the game, rather than a massive overhaul, plus the fur added to Buddy. As this game is developed by Vertigo Games, they are the ones that are developing Metro Awakening VR for Quest, so if Arizona Sunshine 2 is developed by the same people who brought After the Fall, it seems similar to that game's build, since on PCVR some of the weapons are completely different. Seeing Metro VR pan out should be interesting, and if the latter's true, similar to Arizona Sunshine 2 on Quest, and I'll keep you updated when that game gets released and if we see any further improvements or content to Arizona Sunshine 2. If you liked the video, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe for more content, and yeah, see ya.